relationship. I know I've been hammering this part this morning, but I want you, when you leave, to really think about this. The blind man moves within a progression to say that Jesus is a man, that Jesus is a prophet, to Jesus is the Son of God. How many people in our world, majority of people statistically, they tend to believe that Jesus actually lived? There's a few that don't, but historically there is historical evidence that he lived. Secular evidence. Many people say that he is a prophet. The Islam faith tradition says that Jesus is the second greatest prophet. The problem is, if you say that Jesus is a prophet, but you don't do the next step of worshiping and believing that he is the Son of God, then Jesus is a liar, a lunatic. Follow me with that? If you're going to say that he's a prophet, you got to believe what he says. And what does he say? But I am the water of life. I am the light of the world. I am Yahweh God. So you can't claim him as a prophet without believing who he says that he is. So I wonder, where are you today? Where do you sit with understanding who Jesus is? Where do you sit with being in relationship? You still think he's a good man? You know, we'll show up to church sometimes. We'll appease mom and dad, or we'll appease our spouse. Think of him as a man, or have you made that step to say, no, he's a prophet? No, really, he is the Son of God, and I want to worship him. I want to give my life over to him. Because I was blind, but now I see. And the question with that is, are our heart's eyes open to Christ? And are we willing to share with gusto with others? The parents weren't willing to share. They hid. The man whose life was changed was willing to share. He says, I was blind, but now I see. John Newton, some of you probably know this story. John Newton was raised by his father in the 1700s, late 1700s, or mid to late 1700s, who was a captain of a boat. John Newton's mother died. She was a godly lady. She died when John Newton was about 7. At that point in time, he pretty much goes out on the vessels. John Newton is an atheist. John Newton was a drunkard. John Newton got into many different fights. John Newton became a captain of his own ship. John Newton had a mutiny that was going to take place, but 2 of the people that were leading the mutiny ended up becoming sick, and one of them died. John Newton's boat one time had been lost, or they didn't know where it was for 18 months, and it was found. It ended up in Northern Ireland. And the people there celebrated because it was the boat called the Greyhound. And they thought that it had been perished at sea. John Newton did not believe until a couple of those experiences took place. When he had the mutiny that took place, when they thought his ship was going to go down. And John Newton's life changed. You got to remember, too, what was he carrying on the ship? Slaves. Everything about John Newton's life that I read, it was repugnant. But with God, nobody is worthless. With God, everybody is somebody. John Newton ended up giving up the slave trade. He ended up giving up being a captain of a boat. He spent time trying to become a parsons, as they were called then, a pastor, parsons. It took him 6 tries to become a parsons, a pastor. He was 39 when he became a pastor. John Newton wrote that wonderful, famous song, Amazing Grace.